Franco Terrazzano is suing the federal government. I know you like the sound of that. It's over its attempt to implement a higher capital gains tax rate before the parliament even passed the law. A very strange approach. The lawsuit argues the government, through the CRA, was effectively telling Canadians to follow and potentially pay a tax that did not yet legally exist. It claims that this undermines the rule of law and asks the court to stop the government from enforcing or pressuring compliance with an unapproved tax change. Franco Terrazzano, how much of that did I get right?
Yeah, I mean, you got pretty much all of it right. Like, you'll remember under Trudeau and Freeland, I think it was budget 2024, they brought in or they said they were going to hike capital gains taxes. Okay, so that would have been an absolute sucker punch for people who saved their entire lives to grow a business, to fund their own retirement because they worked in the private sector. They're not a government employee with a pension, right? For many people, like, this was their retirement. This was their hard work to put people in our communities to work, right? So this was a financial sucker punch. It was going to hurt Canada's economy. So we fought this right away. But then something interesting happened, okay? So the government under Trudeau and Freeland, they split out the budget bill. And what they were trying to do is they were trying to use it as a political wedge against the Conservatives. But in doing so, the federal government failed to introduce legislation, debate legislation, pass legislation, or even proclaim legislation into law, okay? And then the CRA was going to act as if the government had passed the tax. So the CRA, these unelected bureaucrats, were going to take billions of dollars from Canadians in both an undemocratic way, but also in an illegal way. So us at the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, we're like, no way. We're not going to let these unelected bureaucrats put their grubby paws on 1 cent illegally from taxpayers. So we launched this court fight. And let me tell you, exactly 1 week after we launched our court fight, exactly 1 week to the day, the government backed down. They said they would delay the hike. And then the government eventually got rid of the hike. Okay. But we're still in court because we're arguing that no taxation without representation is not just a catchy slogan. It's enshrined in the Constitution of Canada. So we're in the courts right now to set this important precedent that you can't just have these unelected bureaucrats taking money from Canadians in this undemocratic and illegal way.
It felt to me like, okay, we're getting to the end of, it was getting obvious that we were going to have a new prime minister soon by the time that this started to really take effect. And maybe I'm wrong about this, but the suspicion mounts inside of me, and the conspiracy theorist apparently comes alive when I think about this, because, okay, we're going to have a new head of the Liberal Party going out there and to try and win an election. And in the end, there's a lot of money out of whack in the balance. We had spent so much money on COVID. There had been so much money spent. We were in such a deficit position. And this might have felt like a tax grab at the moment that might have offset a little bit of that huge expenditure that had been unaccounted for, really.
Yeah, I see it as two ways, and I agree with you, but I also see it as another way as well. So let me just say where I think it's added, is I just think it was just pure partisan, gimmicky politics, right? Where the Liberals, they were just flailing in the polls, right? They were so far behind. They were just grasping at straws. And I think they were trying to wedge the Conservatives. But what they failed to recognize, and we released some polling showing this, is that Canadians were just fed up with any tax, right? Canadians felt like, no, this government doesn't deserve a single penny from any Canadian, regardless of who it is. And Canadians were so upset with the economic deterioration that our country has gone through that Canadians were just fed up. They're overtaxed. They said, no way. But here's where I do think it was like some just pure partisan politics and just gimmicky, right? Just gimmicky, brutal policy. Sure. But where I do agree with you is like, look, the government is so in debt, borrowing $80 billion this year. The Trudeau government doubled the debt in 10 years alone, which is mind-boggling, that you now have the government trying to flip over the couch cushions, looking for, money wherever it can find it.
That's what it felt like to me. And of course, you raise a good point. This is a tax against people who made a difference. over the last 25 years, it's interesting, Franco. I hear from my dad. He's so happy with the pension that he got working at Ontario Hydro for all of those years, and how, they made good moves and made the right decisions. And I have to explain to him, well, that's all gone now. There is no such thing as a pension fund. Most of the people that take jobs are taking these jobs on a taxed basis that is contract or a limited in many options. Those jobs that came with the pensions that help you retire have quickly disappeared. What remains is what you can put in the bank, making an effort as a capitalist, as an average Canadian in business. And this taxes them so hard. What was the rate of tax that we were talking about at that moment? It was shocking to me.
Yeah, the inclusion rate was like going to go up to like 2/3 or something like that, which is nuts. And let me just build on what you said here, because look, if you're a politician, right, in Parliament Hill, or you're a federal bureaucrat or another government employee across Canada, you have a taxpayer funded pension, right? The majority of them do. But if you're not in government, you don't. And you can see the data showing that a pension in the private sector has gone away, right? Yeah. And look, so I'm in my early 30s. I guess you could say most of my friends are anywhere from mid to late 20s to about 40. Right? That's the circle that I tend to run in. And for the vast majority of my friends, for essentially all of my friends who are not in the government, having a pension is non-existent, right? Yeah. And nobody even thinks about it. So to your point, the people who are going to get punished with this capital gains tax increase, those are the people who, save their entire lives to either start a business, right, which put people to work, created great jobs, economic benefit for the community, or it was just people who saved and invested, so they had they had that nest egg for their golden years, and they were the ones being punished. By the way, it was doctors who were going to get punished by this, right? You saw doctors outrage. You saw the tech sector. What the government was essentially going to do is, that young graduate from Waterloo who wants to start the next Google right here in Canada, the government was punishing them, telling them to, hey, go look for greener pastures.
Yeah, don't do that here. Don't do that in Canada. It's just going to cost you in the end. That was the one thing that I took away from this, is we talk about brain drain, not just to the U.S., but to other parts of the world now out of Canada, where we provide people an amazing education, often, leading edge. They're going to go. If the difference is, I've got to be, I have to start my business within the framework of a country that wants to tax me in this way, it's a non-starter.
And why would our own government want to punish people who are trying to be successful here, right? Everyone, I truly do believe that the vast majority of people, they want to work hard, they want to be successful, they want to be able to take their kids on vacation, right? That's the dream, right? They want to own their own home, but governments are punishing that. They really are. And let me go back to this, because I almost forgot this political gimmicks of it, right? So Freeland, Trudeau, the government, they wanted to make it out like it was just the monopoly man that was going to pay the capital gains tax increase. But, fortunately, there's an economics professor, Jack Mintz, and he wrote for the C.D. Howe Institute, a very respectable think tank. And his numbers showed hey, this is not the monopoly man who's getting hurt by this capital gains tax increase. These are severely normal Canadians who might get a windfall in capital gains in 1 year, but they aren't making bags and bags of money. These are severely normal Canadians who would be impacted by this capital gains tax increase.
Let's put this in perspective. How many layers of tax do we have to pay? You've put aside $1 million in your RSP, let's say, for your retirement. Now, there comes a time where you have to cash in on your RSP. At that time, what happens? Capital gains tax. Now, you've been taxed on all that money all along.
Yep.
You've invested it. You've made a slight gain on it, or maybe a significant gain on your original investment. You're going to pay tax again at that moment. It doesn't mean that you've got $50 million in the bank. It really is the money that you put aside. But based on inflation, based on, maybe the success of your business, yes, one time as you make that retirement withdrawal to go and buy that home in Florida, or, set yourself up, a huge amount of that money gets taken away at that moment, and you're left in a more destitute, potentially, scenario for your retirement. What good is that for Canada?
And I don't need to tell you, right? Like you would know this just as well as I do, but like how many entrepreneurs out there just absolutely take it on the chin year after year after year who aren't taking money out of their business. They're reinvesting that money so that they can create more jobs, right? So that they can, pay the taxes to government to fund healthcare, fund education, fix the roads, all that kind of stuff. But, for so many entrepreneurs, especially like, mom and pop shops, these young, even just young people out of school who are just grinding away hour after hour after hour. Many of them, they're not paying themselves handsomely, right? They're trying to reinvest in their community. And so what, they go and sell their business, finally trying to live off some of the fruits of their labor, and the government clobbers them. Like, what did the government do for all that money?
Right. And I'll tell you what they did was they took a huge portion of it along the way. Like you say, they made the struggle. They made the corporate tax increases that these companies had to face, these entrepreneurs had to face. They changed the tax laws for how these entrepreneurs can be paid. All of that was, you're right, the hurdles that they had to get over time and time again, only to find this. Franco, I love that you're doing this. What's even more important is the point that you made at the very end, talking about the lawsuit, that you're still in court, because it's important that we make it known and pressed upon the court system indelibly that this should not happen again in the future. Certainly in the tax realm, we should not see this happen. I think it was shocking to Canadians to see that go down at the time. And I think, frankly, it should have cost the election. It did not.
And, I do think it's very important for us to still be in the courts doing this to set that precedent. And as I mentioned, no taxation without representation. It's not just a catchy slogan. It's also not just an American slogan, right? I've heard some people say that. No. Isn't the principle of no taxation without representation is enshrined in the Canadian Constitution, where taxing powers are supposed to lie in Parliament, right? i.e., politicians are supposed to be the ones voting on the tax increase before these unelected bureaucrats take money from people, right? So
100%.
that's why we're still fighting this, to set that important precedent that you can't just have these unelected bureaucrats taking extra money from people when the legislation was never even passed, let alone introduced. The legislation for the capital gains tax increase, it's not like it wasn't just passed. It was never even introduced, let alone debated on in committee.
Franco, before I tell people how they can support you and keeping an eye on going, hold on a second. Just a little bit of liberal water. I don't know if yesterday you were watching TV at all. Maybe you saw the news.
I did, yeah.
What I saw was our Prime Minister, the Premier of Ontario, and the Mayor of Toronto standing in front of a construction site that apparently had no construction going on at all, telling us that they're going to throw $18 billion at the opportunity for us to build some $1 million homes. I was screaming at the television. I don't know what you were doing at that moment. But it occurs to me that we just heard them talk about spending another $18 billion that at a time we probably could be using that money to offset the mistakes we're making with our own resources and maybe put it toward putting gas in the tanks of people trying to get to work right now. Imagine that we put that $18 billion to offset fuel prices or food prices or anything. But what I heard yesterday was, here's another opportunity for developers to build $1 million homes in Ontario. What do we do?
So I don't know. Maybe I see it a little bit of nuance, right? I don't want to be like, oh, there's nuance, blah blah blah. But like I broadly think like getting rid of the HST off of home building is a good idea. It's not novel. It's not novel. Yep. It's been par for the course before. I can live with that one. And like, look, like, so I say getting rid of HST off new homes. Yeah. Okay, good. I mean, you look at some of the, just the exorbitant amount of fees and taxes and regulations, like adding in some jurisdictions, hundreds of thousands of dollars onto the price of a new home. Right. And when we live in a housing affordability crisis, if I can use that word, yeah, I do think the government should get out of the way. Stop making it so hard and expensive to build. Now, the problem that I see in this is like, okay, so I think reducing development fees would be a way to at least help get homes built. However, why are taxpayers funding that? Right?
Exactly. I don't understand why we have to offset money to developers. It's a great business if you can make the model work. If the model doesn't work.
Sorry, if the municipal governments, they should be cutting development fees, but they should be doing that by going into their own bloated budgets. And we all know these municipalities across Toronto are so bloated. They should be doing that by reducing spending in their own municipal budgets, not like relying on federal tax dollars essentially coming from Alberta to essentially subsidize wasteful spending in Ontario municipalities.
Yeah, that's wild to me. The other thing that you pointed out, municipally, we then understand where communities are actually going to be built. Right now, it feels a bit nebulous. Where the developers think it's going to be best to build, that's where the houses will be. It may not be that we need housing in the places that make sense for the developers. I do think that municipalities saying, come here, develop here, would have been a way better approach than just saying, okay, municipalities stand by. One of you is going to hit the lottery.
And why I would like the onus to be on the municipalities is that so then you could actually have tax competition going on between the municipalities, right?
Exactly.
Where now you're actually forcing the municipalities to look inside themselves, to coin a phrase, right? To actually compete to make their own municipalities more efficient so that they can compete to attract not just like housing development, but just economic development writ large. Right. So if you keep the focus on the municipalities where I think it should be, then you actually force some tax competition. And, tax competition isn't this like chalkboard idea. All you have to do to understand tax competition is look to Lloydminster. So Lloydminster is this border town. Half the town is in Alberta, half the town is in Saskatchewan. And if you can go back long enough, a lot of people from that community will remind you that because Alberta's portion had lower taxes, they were actually attracting so much business into the Alberta section and actually forced the Saskatchewan section to become more competitive as well.
More competitive, lay down, reduce the tax. That's a great example, Franco. And so I think that you're right. The municipalities didn't really get represented there in that fashion. They got passed over. Good for them. Do you think that this will have an impact on housing in any way in Canada?
Tough to say. I do think, like I said before, I do think the HST, like just taking the sales tax off, I think that'll help. I don't think it's, I think it's going to help. I think that's good. Is it going to be a silver bullet? Like, I think to actually make homes more affordable, there's a couple things, right? We really have to cut the regulations, red tape that make it almost impossible to build homes at a profitable way. But I also think you got to ease up on the easy money that we've been living off of. Right? For how long has Canada's economy been living off of just easy money in the printing press?
Yeah. We continue to print money to our own detriment just to keep afloat. I mean, the other thing that I wanted to touch on, and maybe you can just kind of look to the future a little bit. Your group is always on the watch. You're the watchdog in my mind that Canadians have on their tax dollars. Is there anything that we're missing on the horizon right now that you just think, okay, I need to plant a seed with people to keep an eye on this? What's on the horizon that you've got your watch on?
Yeah, and I'm just pulling up my notes right now because I want to get this right. So I know you were talking about gas prices, right? Yeah. Obviously, gas prices are soaring. I'm just looking at some of the prices right now. I mean, in Ottawa, where I am, all of the taxes that you pay. So look, you have federal gas tax, provincial gas tax, you have hidden carbon taxes. You even then have federal and the provincial government imposing sales taxes on top of the taxes. The gas taxes are costing about 45 cents per liter of gas in Ottawa. And so one thing I want to point out is that you've already started to see countries around the world start to cut gas taxes in response, right? Yep. So we've already seen Italy, Australia, Spain, Ireland, Portugal. We've seen Slovenia. We've seen Serbia. They have already started to cut gas taxes. So that's one thing to keep an eye on. I bet you it's a very good bet that many more countries will start to cut gas taxes to provide a little bit of relief. So we should be seeing that same type of relief here in Canada.
Okay, well, look, let's make some noise about that. I hope that that's on the agenda for our government. If not, I'm sure that they're going to hear about it from Franco and the amazing folks at the Federation. Listen, I want people to be able to get behind what you're doing. How do you recommend they do that? If people want to support you, sign up and follow along, please help us do that.
Well, the best place to go, and first, I really appreciate you. I appreciate that, and I appreciate this conversation. The best place to go, like our real central web, is our website, and it's taxpayer.com. All the information is right there. It's taxpayer.com. You can also follow along on pretty much every social media channel. Just type in Canadian Taxpayers Federation, and we're pretty active on social media. I have a lot of fun posting on X or Twitter. You can follow me there at Franco_nomics, but best place is taxpayer.com.
You raise a good point. Your social media gets a lot of very cool conversations going between Canadians. So enjoy the post, but certainly make your way down to the comments. Franco Terrazzano, thank you so much for being here.
Hey, thank you.
Patriotic means looking out for each other and fixing things together.
True patriotism is being in the country you love, surrounded by people you love, and great weather.
Being a patriot is being a part of your community and caring for it.
It doesn't matter who you are or where you're from. Patriotism is the one thing we all share.
It's okay to be critical of government and still be a patriot.
It's gratitude to your country.
Of course I'm a patriot. I'm Canadian. It's my home.
Well, actually, true patriot love is the mission.